The end of the year, the beginning of a new year is always state of the collection season. It's a thing YouTubers do. I started putting mine together, but unfortunately, or fortunately, I like having a big collection. I have a very large collection, 100 or so watches, and that makes doing a state of the collection really unwieldy. I've kind of decided, you know what, I've missed it for 2023, 2024. I might let it go for another year and do it later. But not one to let research go to waste. What I did was I sat back and looked at my collection, looked at the notes around that collection, and found some interesting quirks. One interesting quirk I found was there's a bunch of watch features, watch brands, watch characteristics that I quite like. Some of these things I actively like, but for whatever reason, I don't buy. I never actually put in, never actually spend my hard-earned readies on. These aren't deal breakers. A deal breaker is something that stops a watch ever getting on my watch list. The Cyclops is a great example of a deal breaker. I see you've got a Cyclops, bang. You are kicked to the curb. I'm never going to buy you. These instead are features, characteristics, brands that I actually will put on a watch list. And these watches might sit there for years, but I'll never actually buy. Let's talk about what my 8 I'll never actually buy features are after the intro. Hi, I'm Pete McConville, and here I like to overthink, overanalyze, and just geek out on watches, probably far more than they deserve. If that sounds like something you're interested in, keep on watching. If you like what I do, like, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. What I want to talk about today are 8 features or characteristics of watches that for whatever reason, I don't seem to end up buying. One thing I've learned is this is a weird video because I can't even tell you why I don't end up buying these things. These are features and some of these are brands. One of these is a brand that I really like. I'm really into the history. I actively follow. But for some reason, I just don't spend my money on. So anyway, let's kick this list off with the first is compass bezels. There's nothing wrong with a compass bezel. They look fine. They are useful. Worst comes to worst, you just declare north as your starting pip, and then you can use it perfectly well as a timing bezel. So there's nothing functionally wrong with it. They look okay. But despite the fact there's a number of Seikos, there's a number of Breitlings, there's a number of other watches with compass bezels that get onto my watch list, I've never pulled the trigger on them. 100 or so watches. If you count the few I've sold, well north of 100 watches, no compass bezel has ever darkened my door. Next, there'd be California dials. I like the look of the California dial. I'm a big fan of asymmetry and mixing and matching ideas. But likewise, I think Panerai makes some great compass dial watches, which I really like. They're commonly used in a lot of independents that I really like and I follow. But I just have never bought one. And I have a suspicion that that could be related to what's coming next, which is field watches. California dials often seem to crop up on field style watches. Another kind of watch I just don't buy. There's nothing wrong with a field watch, and every now and then I see one and I go, I don't have one in my collection as well, so I'm doubly sort of motivated to say this would add something I don't already have. This would be an extension. This is something I don't, and I see a lot of watches I quite like, but I never quite like them enough. There's never quite enough in them to get them past that other more specialty, more novel watch, and so they just linger in my, hey, that'd be nice one day, but they never quite get pulled. Speaking of watches that I really like the idea of, that have a big hole in my collection, the shape of those watches, that would be Omega. I love the Omega brand. I love its history. I love its story. Its values appeal to me. The watches appeal to me. I've had things like that Aquaterra World Timer on my watch list virtually since the day it was released. I love the new Seamaster. I can look past I don't like the helium escape valve, but I can look past it. It doesn't put me off buying the watch. But I never, ever buy an Omega, despite the fact that I want one, despite the fact that I'm constantly on the verge of getting one. I've never, in all of my watch collecting time, ever bought an Omega. And again, it's hard to know precisely why. I think it's a little bit like that field watch in that academically, I kind of want one. Generically, I kind of want something like that. But when the rubber hits the road and I've got to reach into my bank balance and pull out some money, there's always another watch which is 2 or 3% ahead of it. I can never quite get there. Maybe one day Omega will punch through that. But at the moment, for whatever reason, I've never got around to buying an Omega. Day dates. Now, given my druthers, I'll go for a coin dial, no date. But it's not that I avoid a date. I just prefer a no date. A lot of watches only come with dates. I have no hesitation in buying those. The date doesn't upset me the way some people, are. But for some reason, make that one more. And so as a result, I've got any number of watches with dates. But make that next step and have a day date, and I almost certainly won't buy you. I couldn't tell you why. It's not that I dislike a day date. It's not that they break a watch in a fundamentally different way. It's just when I do look at my 100-odd watches, I've realized I've got like 3 with a day date, and they're all kind of quirky, cheap, vintage watches that I picked up because I probably didn't have any other option. Like if I'm going to get this, really fun old Orient, or there's old sort of weird stack dial 70s styled Alpina dive watch, you kind of didn't have a choice. That was it. That was the only one you could get, in which case I've got a couple of day dates. But in the main, if there's a modern watch and I've got an alternative, I won't buy the day date. But I couldn't tell you why. I don't find them offensive. I don't mind them. I rarely set the date on a watch with a date. So it's not like I don't want to have to set the day and the date, because I know I wouldn't anyway. I don't know why. I just don't buy them. Okay, my next one. Close reissues. Reissues that are nigh on one-to-one versions, reproductions of an older watch. I have precisely one of these. And so I do have a C-Strong, an Alpina C-Strong Heritage, which is a very close, it's not one-to-one, but a very close reproduction of the original Alpina. But after I bought what I've done is I've actually bought the vintage version of that Alpina as well. So I now have the pair. And what I would say is I wear the vintage one 10 times for every time I wear the original, the new version. And I think this idea of if there's a new and an old, I'll always go for the old, really gets to the heart of why I've kind of stopped buying. I don't buy any more of these new reproductions of an old watch. I don't dislike them. The Navitimer 806 that came out was on my watch list because I was really keen on buying one, and they were cheaper than the old ones, more reliable, a whole bunch of reasons. Never pulled the trigger. Likewise, the cockpit or the Copilot, I think Copilot or cockpit, I can't remember which one it was. Again, another Breitling, great watch, well priced, nice and modern, good looking, sat on my watch list forever. I do like an older watch being brought forward, being used as an inspiration, but then being played with a lot. I buy a lot of those, but again, I couldn't tell you why, and I couldn't tell you, it's not an intensely negative feeling about these like one-for-one, reproductions. I just don't buy them. Next would be micro brands. I've got a couple of micro brands. I sort of picked up on a Boulder, and I've got on Boulder as a micro brand. I've got a couple of those, and every now and then, like Farrell watches turn up on my watch list. I listen to podcasts where people talk about, micro brands and their relationship with these brands and the owners. I know a couple of owners of micro brands, and I want to kind of buy one. I keep thinking I will. I want to support the brand. I want to support the owner. They make some nice watches, but a little bit like Omega, it's like there's always something that gets in the way. There's always, another watch which is 5% better. There's always another watch which is sort of doing what the micro brand does, but just a little bit better than they do. And as a result, despite the fact I almost really want to buy more micro brands, I want to be more engaged in that space, I never get around to actually buying the watch. Okay, so my eighth and final began life as just a thing I don't buy. But as I went through this video and as I started writing the notes and started looking and thinking about this one more carefully, this one has in fact now crossed over. And if I do another deal breaker, will be on the deal breaker video. But I've never mentioned it before. And when I started thinking about this, this was not a deal breaker. It was just a thing I don't buy. And that is Screwdown pushers. I didn't, for the longest time, I didn't collect chronographs. I didn't have a lot of chronographs. And then I started buying some chronographs. Then I started buying some more chronographs. And now I've probably got ballpark about 10. And I noticed that they all just have non-screw down pushers. That some have got pump pushers, some have got other styles, but never screw down. And at the time, I thought that was purely because I'm just picking watches that just happen not to have screw down pushers. But I think now, on reflection, I'm actually anti screw down pushers. They've crossed the line. They've gone from, oh, that's not something I really value, to, oh no, this is now, you are never going to get on my watch list. If I looked at, and this is what really probably pushed me over the edge, I went back and looked at my watch list, the list of watches that are in my, one day I would like to get this, one day I would like to add this to my collection. Not a single watch with screw down pushers. And I think it comes back to, I've become ambivalent about even screw down crowns. I would prefer a brand to be able to tell me, you've got 100 meters water resistance in a push-pull crown. For me, that is actually a more interesting watch. It says more about your faith in your own engineering, and it's a shit tin easier as a watch to own. You don't have to fiddle and futz about with screwing it in and out. So, like I said, I've actually gravitated towards preferring push-pull over screw-down crowns. Now, for a crown, I can live with it, but the inconvenience. But the idea of a screw down pusher, that's crossed the line now into unacceptable territory. That's too much piss farting around. So yeah, like I said, when I first started putting this video together, the idea of screw down pushers was, well, that's just something I'm ambivalent about, to actually now, I'll make it my last one, that's a deal breaker. That's, I will not buy, I will not even contemplate, I won't put on my notepad of watches to watch any watch with a screw down pusher. So anyway, they're 7 gusting 8 things that for whatever reason, despite the fact not having strong feelings, or perhaps even liking watches, I just don't buy. Do you guys have any of those? Do you have watches that live on a watch list for years, but you never quite get around to pulling the trigger on? I'd be really interested to know, have you ever tried to dig into that and figure out why that is? Do you think it's just a matter of time? Do you think that these things might develop into deal breakers like my Screwdown pushes? Love to know. Put it in the comments below. We'll have a chat. See you later. Bye.